Right at the top of my list was one that, this is actually a great subject for kind of a reset, a beginning of the year. We just came through our study of finding yourself in transition, and it kind of spits you out at the end there with a feeling of, well, what's next? And certainly in the life of our country, and so in the life of a lot of our cities, and in a lot of our lives, we're at a new beginning. So as we step out into this, I don't know if we can call it a new normal, because maybe we should start thinking of things as a new abnormal, because abnormal is normal, just as change is the only constant. But it's important, and this is, of all the things that I learned in seminary about things you're going to need in your toolkit in order to be a minister. It's like almost like the bag you put them in, right? Which is what's the first thing you got to have for your toolkit? Well, you got to have a bag to put your tools in. The first thing you've got to have is you got to have self-care, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to do anything for anybody else. You're not going to be of use. I mean, that's also a lesson that gets pounded into us in 12-step. If I don't take care of my sobriety, I'm eventually going to go back out and drink again, and I'm not going to be of any use to anybody, because it'll probably kill me. So that message, when they kept repeating that in seminary, it really hit home with me, because rather obviously I've been sober for some time before they let me into seminary, thankfully. So what we're going to do today is I want to kind of go through some of the principles of self-care, and we're going to talk about making a self-care plan. So I would suggest that if you're the kind of person that likes to take paper notes, that you grab a little notepad and pencil or pen. And if you prefer doing it electronically, go ahead and open a file, and let's dive into this and see where we go. So I have a little graphic here, Haley, that says, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. And that's exactly what I was just talking about. It's that whole get the oxygen mask on you before you try to help somebody else. And as I have on the slide here, it is a personal matter, and so everybody's approach is going to be different. I'm going to kind of talk about a framework of self-care, but every one of you needs to have a different self-care program. So I can't just hand you one and say, you do this and you're going to be fine. I know from living with Laura that the things that make her feel happy and at ease, and the things that make me feel happy and at ease, are often completely different things. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's, when you're in relationship, and certainly in partnership, you need to not only understand that, but respect it, and support it and encourage it, right? But self-care relates to what you do both at work and at home. Maybe if you don't go to work, it's all, at home, right? Like, I don't actually go to a workplace, even though this is my profession, what we're doing right now, right? But you look after and I love this phrase, holistic well-being, so that you can meet your personal and professional commitments. So aspects of self-care include workplace or professional self-care, physical self-care, psychological self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, relationship self-care. Some people would even put financial self-care in there, right? And you could add to that list if you wanted to, and if you need to, okay? There's certainly other ways of doing self-care, and they're all valid, especially if they're valid for you. And that's the key. Okay. So Again, today's disclaimer, and Haley, I have a picture here. It says 50 ways to take a break. So it's like a little graphic that nobody probably online can read because the words and the pictures are too small. It's like 50 different ways of doing self-care. So the activities and the suggestions today are just a guide, right? It's not right or wrong. And it's important to choose the activities that are meaningful and sustainable to you and your own goals. All right. So first thing I want to talk about is workplace or professional self-care. And I have a little graphic here of somebody kind of sitting in the cross-legged position with a computer and a cup of coffee. And it says balance and self-care in the workplace. And, you know, that might seem like, yeah, right, sure, we've all got a yoga mat at work. But I can tell you that there are times when making it a habit to take a break for meditation or, you know, fresh air or whatever it is during the day can be absolutely vital. I may have, some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but my first trip overseas at the end of the cycle, I got asked to do some interviews with media outlets back home. And kind of in the warm up, the civil affairs sergeant was just asking me some softball questions to get me going. And he asked me how I'd gotten through the day. And I said meditation, because what I would do is every day at lunch, instead of going to the chow hall for lunch, I would go back to my my little tin can that I lived in and drink a shake and then do half an hour meditation. And I'm telling you, it just, you know, just taking that time in the middle of the day really made me a much better warrant officer every afternoon. You know, it's like by noon, I was just about ready to, you know, go Chief Perry on somebody, and that's never a good thing. So it was just really, God, such a huge help to me to be able to take that time and just, you know, breathe, right? And different people, it may work out different ways. You know, what you think of as balance and self-care in the workplace can outpicture in completely different ways. So some of the examples that are in these little bullet points are engage in regular supervision or consulting with a more experienced colleague. You know, it's funny, Laura has the job she has now because she reached out to a more experienced colleague back at UAB and asked for some mentorship. Set up a peer support group. This one is tough for people, but it is absolutely, I don't think that we are trained well to do this, but it's absolutely critical. Be strict with boundaries between clients/students and staff. Setting boundaries is one of the healthiest things we can do, and it's also one of the hardest things for us to do. You know, at some point, instead of doing a regular lesson at church, I ought to have Laura lead us in a session on role-playing boundary setting in the workplace, because I know she can do that really well. Reading professional journals or other you know, stuff for your own workplace kind of growth, things that have to do with your job but maybe aren't exactly your job. I know Laura reads the Harvard Business Review, and you know, that's one of the ways that she kind of keeps on top of things. And attend professional development programs. So there are a lot of things, you know, among the things that workplace or professional self-care can also embody is, you know, making sure that you have a plan for work-life balance. You know, at what point are you willing to say, you know what, if you want me to do that, boss, then you got to pick what's going to fall off my schedule, you know, because I'm not working until 8 or 9 o'clock every night and on weekends. I took this job because I could have some work-life balance. I'm going to need that, right? Or again, like setting up the boundaries. It's like, yeah, you may be my biggest client, but I'm not going to let you talk to me that way. It may involve some uncomfortable conversations, but you know what? We need to have uncomfortable conversations, and it's funny, for maybe forever, but certainly since I've been alive, the American culture has been all about, we're going to stuff all that stuff. We're going to just shove that stuff under the rug. All those unpleasant things, all those things that kind of rub against the grain, all those things that are, against the white cisgender heteronormative male patriarchy. We're just going to yes sir the boss and drive on, because otherwise we're going to be out in the cold, and that's not healthy. We have surpassed the Japanese in working ourselves to death, and that's saying something. They even have a word for it. I can't say it, but they actually, there's a word for that. We have, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, we're past them now, and that's not good. So there is not only taking your own career seriously and making choices based on, hey, is this going to be good for my career? Is working for this person good for my career, or do I need to move? But also, is this job good for my mental health and my physical health? And, is there a way that I can maybe craft a better position here? And sometimes maybe it is just about improving your position. Is it, can I personalize my workspace? If that's a thing, can I bring in a plant? Can I add some pictures of the people that I love? Are there ways that I can make my work life better that are really simple and just take a little bit of time and effort? Physical self-care, boy, this is big. I said as I took a drink of water, which is, one of my growing edges is I don't drink enough water. So I've got after my coffee pot's empty in the morning, I've gotten into the habit of filling a big water bottle and just drinking that, carrying it around with me. But physical self-care pictures as activities that help you to stay fit and healthy and with enough energy to get through your work and personal commitments. So here are some suggestions, certainly, not all the things that you could think of. Develop a regular sleep routine. Aim for a healthy diet. Take lunch breaks. Go for a walk at lunchtime. Take your dog for a walk after work. Use your sick leave. I'm not going to name any names. Get some exercise before/after work regularly. And then I have this, it's the graphic, Haley, is one of those kind of word salad ones that's got a bunch of different terms kind of in different fonts thrown up on a background. And there's things that you might think of, like balanced, healthy eating and exercise. And then there's things that you might not think of as often, like deep breathing to reduce stress, routine medical appointments and exams to primary MD, OBGYN, dentist, and regular sexual behavior, limit caffeine, which, now you're just meddling, Pastor. But anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say check my Bible on that. I don't know what that was, but caffeine wrecks my sleep. I almost always regret it. So I try to drink tea when I can.
And see, that's a good thing to know. Yeah, Laura and I go through a good pot of coffee a day at home, and I know she drinks more coffee than that at work. So
Yeah, you got to do it as early as you can so it can get out of your system by the time you're going to sleep. But
yeah,
sometimes it doesn't work.
yeah, no, that's exactly what I do. I get up first thing in the morning and, and I have a shot of espresso while the coffee is brewing. just, just to jumpstart me. And and then Laura and I drink a pot, and that's usually it for me for the day. Every once in a while, I'll have a caffeinated soda at lunch, but then after that, I cut it off.
Yeah.
But, there's 1,000
Programmers
ways.
like to drink Mountain Dew just because it's a stereotype.
Right? That stuff
Yep.
will absolutely fire you up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that, you can see there's a lot of things on here that seem obvious, and then some things that are less obvious. One of the sad facts of us not having universal health care is that if you don't have good health care, things like regular checkups and regularly going to the dentist, regularly going to the eye doctor, they don't become habits. And if they're not habits for us as an adult, it's hard to adopt that habit. I'm trying to do better with that. In terms of it's kind of a bummer because, I had just finally gotten a really good primary care doctor in Birmingham, and, then we left. But even before I got one through Laura, I'd been going to the VA on the regular, which is slower, but, at least I kind of had an idea of what my overall health was. And for me, physical self-care, a lot of that just involves regular exercise, which I got into primarily because I was in the National Guard for so long and I had to pass my PT test, and that got me really more in touch with my body because I would know, Charles, you're struggling, you need to up it a little bit or you're going to fail your PT test this time around. But there are and can anybody think of physical self-care things that are not on this list or that we haven't already talked about?
I can share one personally.
Okay.
So I don't know if I've told you guys this, but I've I guess suffered from is the right term, from trichotillomania and dermatillomania since like 3rd grade. So one of the things that I try to do or was doing and need to start doing again is taking care of my skin. And I've never been too into makeup, like the cosmetic, want to look pretty thing. But I realized that when I take care of my skin like that, I'm less likely to pick at it or mess with it because it's like I have this thing going and I don't want to mess it up or don't want to ruin it. So skincare is actually something that I don't take for granted as much anymore. And I'm sure it's good for your emotional being. I mean, it can feel good, but for me, it's a little more practical.
Wow. No, that's a good one. And thank you. I wouldn't have thought of that, but boy, and that reminds me, I've heard it said over and over again that your skin is your largest organ.
Yeah, definitely.
So if it's healthy, obviously it's going to have a big impact on your health because, you're going to be able to perspire more easily and get rid of toxins that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else?
I would say like one of the things that obviously I need to probably do more, but you help me with is touching your body in a kind way. Like you give me, massages sometimes, and that really, really helps because it's a loving thing you can do for your body that makes it feel less like a utilitarian, like meat envelope that's carrying your brain around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's really great, honey. Thank you. Being kind to yourself physically, rubbing the places that hurt instead of just, trying to ignore them, or, being mad at them and taking a pill, you know, in as whether or not you buy into all of the theology. Myrtle Fillmore, who was one of the co-founders of Unity, and the way that she worked with her body, the fact that she said loving things to it, even though it was in pretty bad shape when she started, seemed to really have a positive effect on her. And, obviously there, whether we want to call that the placebo effect or, mental healing, whatever it is, that being kind, both physically and mentally, to our bodies, I think is a big key. There are certainly, especially the autoimmune kind of things, things that we can do to love our bodies, both, whether it's just, healing touch or, positive affirmations that can make a big difference. So
my only objection to the term placebo effect is that while there is a lot of, understanding and proof that it's real at this point, it makes it secondary to more mechanical ways of dealing with our bodies, and it really ought to be our first line of interaction. You ought to be.
I agree. I mean that term has a kind of a pejorative attachment to it, when actually, like I said, if you want to call it mental healing, I think it's a much more accurate way of terming it. And as
it's even deeper than just healing. It's, it should be our first, line of interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things where, in terms of our self-care, it's like, every morning when I wake up, do I pause for a second and simply be thankful for the fact that I woke up? And, like, one of the things I'll do is I'll like wiggle all my fingers and toes and be grateful that they all still work. Literally, I mean, I do that. And it's, I think it's a good practice. I think it's a good practice for us to love ourselves and to honor our bodies, and to use our minds to continue to feed, positive vibes and, hey, positive chemicals, if I can throw a little serotonin that way, I'm going to do it. But yeah, the placebo effect, makes it's like it poo-poos things just by you mentioning it. But I agree. It is absolutely something that is, should very well be considered, like you said, the first thing that we do. At some point, I don't necessarily teach from a lot of the old Unity stuff, but at some point, maybe we could take a look at some of Myrtle Fillmore's healing letters. I really like her, in a lot of cases, more than I like Charles. He's we have a lot more of his writings. More of those, I mean, pretty much all of his writings survived, because he outlived Myrtle. And, rumor has it that Charles' second wife, Cora, fed most of Myrtle's stuff to a Franklin stove there at the village, which is kind of sad. But I just giggle a little bit about it because people are funny. Anyway. So psychological self-care, and, these are, and this is just a definition, a loose definition, activities that help you feel clear-headed and able to intellectually engage. This says with professional challenges, and I can say, we have professional challenges, but personal challenges, all the challenges that you find in your work and personal life. So things that can help you take, and The image I have here just says, take care of your brain. You keep a reflective journal. And Laura could probably teach us all about that because she's a compulsive journalist. Seek and engage in external supervision or regularly consult with a more experienced colleague. Yeah. Or, go to therapy. Let me paraphrase that. Find a therapist, go to therapy. Engage with a non-work hobby. So many people in our culture feel like if you're not getting paid for it, it's not worth doing. And that is absolutely, 100% wrong. If it makes you happy, if you enjoy doing it, you don't have to get paid to do it. It's sad. We have so many people that are talented and good at things, and they end up letting them go and, laying on their couches watching TV when they get home from the job that supports them, instead of getting out and being involved. I mean, you take a look at people like me that, got a degree in theater. Well, as soon as we're all able to do it again, I'm going to go start knocking on doors at the community theaters here in Baton Rouge and saying, hey, I'm Charles, you want to buy some? I direct, I act, I stage manage, I'll twist a wrench, whatever you got. And of course, like people like me, I play D&D, and I spend, quite a lot of time doing it because I love it. Not any money involved there, except what I occasionally pay for books and online access to things, but it's great stuff. Turn off your email and work phone outside of work hours. I know a lot of people have fancy excuses for not doing that. Not going to name names.
Hey, so I just want to jump in there for a second, though, and say that kind of is a luxury. Like, most jobs now do not permit that kind of divorce from work. There is an ongoing expectation of availability in the digital age, and especially if you're at a management level, that, I don't have the luxury of checking out of email and phone for the weekend. I just don't.
I think that, and I can honor that. But I also know that there are a lot of people that kind of compulsively look at all of their work stuff, all the time, even when new stuff isn't coming in. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like they're married to that BlackBerry, when they really need to be paying attention to what their kids telling them, right? Mm-hmm. And
keep going.
So I was just going to say that there's a piece of this that has to do with, both work-life balance and kind of a feeling of safety, instead of staying in that, in that state of anxiety, just relaxing. And, as our Buddhist friends would say, just let that shit go. I realize that I probably have a unique perspective on walking away from work because I spent 32 years in the National Guard. And when I was downrange, buddy, I was downrange. It's just like, you know what? It'll be there when I get back, guys.
Yeah, but you were also legally protected from them penalizing you from being unavailable when you were downrange.
At least I thought so.
Well, you were until you went to work for a church.
Yeah.
Yeah. The food service industry. Oh, thanks, dog. Food service industry in general, when my boyfriend was working in college and my friends, not only were they in desperate need of money, which meant they always wanted their phone on so they could take an extra shift, but there's definitely pressure on you to be on call. The nice thing about the job I have now is that if I am on call, say I've got something going on, or there's a difference between on call and just any off day. Yeah. It's really nice to have that distinction, but yeah, depending on what you're doing, sometimes on call is like the default, and that sucks. My I have an aunt that works for like the water treatment plant in Florida, and that's kind of how her life is. She's hardly ever off. She's almost always on call. So
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, it sucks. I think it would be better, like if you're on call, that needs to be like a designation, and you need
Mhm.
to have days where you do not have to be on call. I don't think on call should ever be like the default because it's
Exactly.
miserable.
Yes, it is. So the in terms of positive things, make time for relaxation. And it's sad, but there are actually, I mean, there's a lot of people that have to make time for relaxation because their schedule's so full. Anybody who is a single mom who works knows exactly what I mean. And they're like, yeah, sure, Charles. When am I going to do that between 2 and 3 in the morning? Because I'd really love to be asleep then. God, sometimes 5 minutes a day is a great way to start meditating. 1 minute, if that's all you can find, but just time to begin working on that discipline of saying, this time is for me, and this time is for me to relax and not feel guilty about relaxing. And that, when you first get started, that's really hard to do. Okay. I know. So it's really important to be able to do that. And it pays dividends. I mean, you may feel like, well, I'm just sitting around doing nothing. No, you're not. You're actually doing self-care, and that's important. Make time to engage with positive friends and family. And how many of you have heard the term energy vampire?
I've exposed myself to many an energy vampire.
Right? Yeah, I was going to say, how many of you can, when I say energy vampire, like either a face or a few faces, or maybe a whole conga line of faces comes to mind. We know that those people that when you're done with them, you're like, God. Yeah. So you want to try to find the other people, the people that, when you're done, you feel better, So, and this gets back to engaging with a non-work hobby. And I've mentioned this before. So like my D&D group that I play with on Wednesdays, this past Wednesday night, it was about, it was 12 minutes after 10. And I was like, guys, I think we're going to freeze time here because it's 12 after 10 and, I'm starting to fade a little bit. 11:03. I'm like, guys, and we stopped playing, but we kept talking and enjoying each other's company for another, 45 minutes. Late into the night when we all had to, be up and go to, well, I didn't have to be up. I had to be up and make coffee, but, most of them had to get up early and go to work. But that, we make time and we engage with friends that make us feel good. That we have a good, positive time with, and it's important. So emotional self-care. And, I know as a guy that grew up both in a time and a place and a family where feelings were not allowed unless you were the dad, and then you were allowed to get angry. And that was pretty much it.
Can I add something real fast before we move on from that last one?
Uh-huh.
Social media.
Oh, yeah.
Psychological and emotional self-care. Social media makes it worse.
Yeah.
Like there are tons of studies that say that your depression levels are much higher when you're engaging a lot with Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, because you're regularly comparing your insides to other people's outsides, and not even people's real outsides, people's like fake presented outsides that they want you to think are real.
Yeah. Thanks, honey. Yeah, that's good. That's true.
I actually put a control on my Facebook where I'm not allowed to spend more than an hour a day. Now, lately I've been too busy to spend more than an hour a day anyway, and I usually don't hit that alert. But I have an alert set up so that I won't spend, because it's so easy to just turn it on and just scroll all day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That is a very good point. Similarly, and I'm not advocating checking out of life. I have some friends, especially friends that I know from, either from Unity or, from other ends of the woo-woo spectrum that are like, oh, I don't look at the news because, it depresses me. Well, glad you're privileged, that you don't have to worry about the outside world. But being a news junkie, and getting in and reading as much of the bad news as you can all the time. There was a time when I would get up first thing in the morning, and it was back when I had access to it. I was still, on a Department of Defense email, and I could get in and read the early bird brief, which is the, defense intel brief that is prepared for, the White House and Congress and et cetera. And it often had things that were a little scary in it. And then I would, go out and read CNN and read whatever else I could get my hands on. So yeah, most days nowadays it's either, CNN, AP, NPR. And I probably read more than I should, but that's also another way of getting really depressed, is like over consuming bad news. Because truth is, there's a lot of really good things going on out in the world today, but very few of those make the news. I mean, they're not considered, quote, newsworthy, unquote. It's like the thing in Harry Potter where Harry's listening under the window to the Muggle news, and they get to the point where they have the little story about the water skiing budgeriggers. And Harry's like, okay, if we've gotten to that part of the newscast, that's it, because they only give you one little piece of good news at the end to kind of leave you off with a smile. Anyway, yes, thank you, honey. So that's social media, news media, pretty much. Okay, emotional self-care. So allowing yourself to safely experience your full range of emotions, that is just huge. And boy, speaking from a guy who grew up in the culture I grew up in, we were not allowed to do that. That was absolutely verboten, right? So how do we do that? Especially those of us that were, forbidden, ridiculed or beaten for doing exactly that. Well, we develop friendships that are supportive. Again, not that are subtractive, not a friendship with an energy vampire. Here's a good little one to put on your, maybe put on your plan. Write 3 good things that you did each day. Play a sport and have a coffee together after training. Go to the movies or do something else you enjoy. Keep meeting with your parents group or other social group. Talk to your friend about how you're coping with work and life demands. And then I've got a graphic here that you may have a tough time reading this, and I know you can't read them, Haley, but it says things like start a journal, watch a funny movie, express your feelings, learn to say no, accept compliments. That's a tough one for a lot of people. Smile more, cry it out, ask for help. So many of us have a real tough time doing that. What other emotional self-care tools does anybody else use?
I go to church.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. That's and that's true. Because in some ways we're kind of like that group, you keep meeting with a group of people that you feel safe with and that you're able to connect with emotionally. And it makes a big difference. And that you're safe to express your actual emotions with. It is important.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of this
it's just so important when you're feeling low to reach out to positive people, like we said. I'm really lucky that my parents, that I can come to them and we kind of have, for better and for worse, like a friendship kind of relationship. We're really open with each other. We don't hide a lot of things. So I always have them as people that I can come to, even when I feel like I'm my worst. And you know, if you don't have that, finding friends or anyone that can fill that role is just so important. I've watched enough TED Talks. Like, I think it's not enough TED Talks, but like I've seen, like, why do we cry, or why do we do the things we do when we're sad? And it's to, you know, attract attention and get help. We naturally reach out when we're upset. So it's hard for me to think of anything new, because I think that when I'm really feeling bad, you know, reaching out to someone and doing anything, whether it's just talking or finding a distraction, is just so important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. All right. So doing our emotional self-care, and then our spiritual self-care. And I love the way that this is, that this is worded. It involves having a sense of perspective beyond the day-to-day life. You know, we think of spiritual concerns as being, you know, kind of the bigger questions, and being able to kind of pull back from day-to-day life and giving ourselves time to ask big questions and seek big answers. So this involves things like engaging in reflective practices like meditation, journaling, going on bushwalks, or, you know, getting out in the country, going to church, you know, doing yoga, which is, you know, in its classical form, it's actually a way of getting to a spiritual practice, not, you know, exercise for bendy people. Reflecting with a close friend for support. And then I found this little graphic, and Haley, it has a list of things on it, like meditate for 10 minutes, pray, read inspirational work, volunteer in your community, take a walk in the park, eat lunch outside on the grass, try a guided imagery, do a random act of kindness, try chanting, mindfully observe a flower. You know, so there's a lot of different things that count as spiritual self-care. I know one of the yogis in Birmingham has something that they call the Earth Church. And, you know, like on the first Sunday of every month on the morning, you know, she and her group will like go outside into the trees and do whatever it is they do. They do a little yoga, they do a little meditation. And it's, you know, it's kind of a bonding experience with nature. I honestly think that there's a lot of the people that are out fishing, you know, they go out and they throw a line in the water. Some of whom they probably never catch anything, but, you know, they claim they're out there fishing, but I think it's really a spiritual practice, what they're doing. So spiritual reading, journaling, meditation, prayer. And, you know, in future lessons this year, we'll get into, you know, some methods of doing journaling and meditation practices, and, you know, maybe even a few different kinds of prayer. So I think this is it for the description of the pieces. Oh, there was relationship self-care. Okay, so one more, and then I think I'm going to continue this next week, because I've also got the whole section on creating a self-care plan. So we will get to that next week. But, you know, relationships. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Relationship self-care is about maintaining healthy, supportive relationships and ensuring you have diversity in your relationships, so you're not only connected to work people, if you are, you know, still in the workplace. So prioritize close relationships in your life, for example, with partners, family, and children. Attend the special events of your family and friends. You know, it blows me away when I hear stories about, kids whose dads just never took enough time off work to go see him do anything, ever. It's like, come on now, let's prioritize what's really, really worthwhile. Arrive to work and leave on time every day. And that's not about, oh, I'm punctual at work. It's about, when it's time for me to go home, I go home, because that's why I go to work is for the people at home. So I value the people at home. I'm going to go home and spend time with people at home. And that's just for example. And of course, what I didn't get into in here is the whole other piece about relationship self-care, which has to do with, setting boundaries and, like really taking care of yourself in whatever kind of relationship it may be. It is so hard for us sometimes to stand up for ourselves in relationship. And, we weren't created to be a species of doormats. Whatever kind of relationships you have that matter to you, whether it's a work relationship or with a significant other, with your parents, with your children, with whoever it might be, you have rights, and you deserve to be respected as a human being. And there may be boundaries that need to be drawn. And I'll tell you, when you do draw boundaries and start enforcing them, there are going to be some people that are going to be pissed off and they're not going to like it. And they're basically the people who've been violating your boundaries. They're used to taking advantage of you, and they're going to expect that they have the right to continue to do that. So they are obviously going to resent it when they don't get to. And you have to be willing to say, yeah, I can live with that, So when it comes to relationship self-care, what pieces work for you? All right.
I think at this point, I'm more familiar with what doesn't work.
Well, that's so can you give us an example?
Oh, well, I just, it's hard to not think back to like my previous relationship, and, he couldn't make friends. He couldn't make other friends. I ended up being, it's this diversity in your relationships. I ended up being the sole person to listen to, years of trauma and daily hardships and almost constant negativity. And I saw him in 4 years, also sabotage any relationships that he did have outside of us. And it, the no boundaries part, I think if I try to date again, I'm going to try to look for someone who has a healthy support system around them, because I care a lot, and clearly that was something that appealed to him, but it was so lopsided, so exhausting. So yeah, I that's just what comes to mind first, really.
No, that's good. Yeah. All right. Anybody else?
Well, again, this is a failing, or not yet learned as opposed to a recommendation. But, was just realizing that early in my work world that I spent a lot of extra hours at work, mostly because there were high expectations of things being handled to a degree that, that one really couldn't fit into the time. And there was this with constant implicit threat that if they needed to downsize or, that they would come after us and that they would definitely be able to find something that was undone and, and write us up or terminate us because of it. And somehow I thought that was, just the way the work world was and that was reasonable. And we had an alcoholic boss and, who would explode on a regular basis. And that seemed, that was consistent with what was going on at my home without alcohol, but very similar. So, at any rate, I do hope that there will be another chapter for me, after transplant, and it might actually even include work. I don't know. And I hope that, if it does, that I find a way to interact with that world in a way that's more self-supportive.
Yeah.